welcome to East Coast Sailing. If you're new to the channel, thanks for joining and consider subscribing. I'm Rob and today we're heading out to Pinmill. I'm going to be landing my boat on the scrubbing post for the very first time, and let's just say the tides and the wind weren't playing ball. Today's journey is relatively short. I'll be leaving my new home port Woolversone marina based in Ipswich and travelling over towards Pinmill. I'll be landing on one of the 3 scrubbing posts waiting for the tide to come out. Normally I'd have my boat lifted out at the end of the off season, however Ivania costs about £700 to have lifted in and out again at a professional boatyard. And if you follow the channel for a while, you'll see that I changed every component under the waterline last season. I've also really enjoyed winter sailing, building up my confidence, and you have to take the rough days with the good days. One of the main reasons for going onto the scrubbing post was to check the anodes. I wanted to make sure they were all intact and had plenty of meat left on them. Another job was a fouled paddle wheel log. You tend to get a lot of seaweed caught in the paddle wheel log, which prevents the reading coming through on the display. I had made some feeble attempts to try and clean the underside of the boat during the sailing season to try and save a few pounds. The boat was feeling very slow. We had lost a couple of knots of through water speed, and I could see from this footage how much growth we had on the underside. Make sure you go and check the area out at low water where you're going to beach your boat. You want to make sure you understand what the features are like, if the ground's firm underfoot, and if there's any obstructions that might damage the boat. It was a very early start to the morning and I jumped in the car and made my way to Woolversone at 4 AM. I found a tide that was 5:30 in the morning. That would give me full daylight getting on and off the scrubbing post, as well as giving me time to get back to my home marina in full daylight. I'm a massive advocate of using Google Maps, specifically satellite imagery, to home in on deepest parts of the channel as well as features you need to get to. It's much more reliable than using your sailing apps. Before arriving at the scrubbing posts, be organised, get the tiller into autopilot and put out the fenders as well as the barge boards. They're going to protect the white gel coat against the scrubbing posts, which are typically made of metal. So let's run through some tidal theory. The morning tide at Pinmill was going to be at 5:33 in the morning and it would be a 3.6 metre tide. The afternoon tide where I'd be getting the boat off the scrubbing post would be at 5:57, however the height was only 3.2 metres, so it's 40 centimetres lower than the morning tide. I would have to delay my arrival at the scrubbing post by 40 minutes to make sure the next tide was high enough to be able to get off the scrubbing posts. It was nerve-wracking approaching the scrubbing posts. We had a breeze of 20 knots behind us. I was conscious to keep away from the metal posts on the right, which marked where the concrete slipway dropped off by 1.5 metres. If Ivania landed on that, it could have been catastrophic. I could see the depth gauge creeping all the way up to 0 metres under the keel, and we put the boat in full reverse to make sure we had a soft landing. I couldn't have timed it any better as the boat bottomed out just as it got parallel with the scrubbing post. Everything was going a little bit too well, and whenever you think that in boating there's always something that goes wrong, and it did. When I got my first glimpse of the underside of the boat, I couldn't believe how bad it was. I jumped into the water with my wetsuit on to begin cleaning the hull, and I tell you what, it was freezing. The sea temperature is still sitting around 8 degrees at this time of year. Looking at the underside of the boat, I could see there was seaweed that was 5 centimetres long and seashells that had formed on the underside of the hull. It was creating a lot of drag and it was noticeable. This boat can normally do 8 knots through the water and it was only doing 6, so we'd lost 25% of our speed through the water. It was also using a lot more fuel when under engine and it was noticeable. I'm also sailing to the Netherlands in a couple of days, and that journey is 16 hours across the North Sea, and that would add another 4 hours onto the journey time if I didn't clean the hull. I would never say this to my wife, but it was quite therapeutic sitting under the boat, scraping off the seaweed and looking around at the surroundings. You can see how bad the starboard side is compared to the port side, which I've already scraped and cleaned. I wouldn't bother bringing a carbide scraper, but the wire brush is essential, as well as a wide filling knife, and a smaller filling knife is great for getting in those smaller gaps. And this is exactly why I bought a Vanya. Having a twin rudder is such an advantage taking to the ground, even though miraculously is floating just on the wing keel itself. The propeller and all of the anodes looked to be in excellent condition, and with a quick wire brush it brought the propeller back to its former glory. And make sure you grease up the splines on the folding propeller. I've also done a gory folding propeller rebuild video which could be helpful. Even though the boat was well secured, I propped some rocks under the rudders to keep the boat nice and stable, and also tied some ropes from the cleats onto the scrubbing posts. The wind gust had also picked up to 30 knots, so I tied a line from the winch round one of the other scrubbing posts towards the rear. With all the jobs done and the boat firmly secured, it was time to have a well-deserved pint in the Butter and Oyster. Little did I know that this pub would soon become my local. The whole gang turned up to witness Ivania being beached. It was a big celebration, and we also had lunch in the Butter and Oyster and decided to go and explore Pinmill on foot. The kids had a classic game of poo sticks over the river, and we also saw a munkjack roaming around in the field. It was time to head back to the boat as the tide started to make its way in. I got creative, taking some time-lapse footage of the tide coming up until Salsa Lady came along in yellow. I was really enjoying my new sailing ground, especially the ships coming in and out of the River Orwell. It's blowing an absolute hoolie outside. I'm tied on to the scrubbing post at Pinmill, and I'm starting to get a bit worried. I think we're on neap tides at the moment, and we've probably got another 40 minutes to high tide and we're not quite floating, so it's a bit frustrating. I'm just winched on, just so I don't slip back any further. It seems to be almost directly behind us, this wind, slightly off, so it's not going to be blowing me onto the post, so hopefully I get off tonight. I'm not sure if it's worth saving, you know, a few hundred quid to get the boat lifted out, considering how much damage could be done with all these posts on the gel coat. The wind's really picked up today. I should have checked again this morning. The forecast was looking alright last night, but it's really changed. We've got 30 knot gusts, 20 constant, so yeah, not a nice day to be out here, but I had a lovely day at Pinmill. We're going to go for a nice restaurant meal shortly. Big green ship, a lot of action going on this river. And my suspicion of not having enough water to be able to get the boat off came to fruition. We were well and truly stuck. The one thing I hadn't considered on my tidal planning was air pressure, and we had very high air pressure on the day. Air pressure is measured in millibars, and the average pressure at sea level is 1013 millibar. On the day, the air pressure increased to 1033 millibar, which is 20 millibars over what it was in the morning. An increase of 1 millibar over the standard atmospheric pressure equates to 1 centimetre, and we were 20 millibars over, so we were going to have a reduced tidal height of 20 centimetres. What made things worse is the tide heights were actually getting worse over the week, and I would have to wait till Wednesday until the tides increased enough to be able to get me off. My last hope was the morning tide on Sunday, which was the next day, and you can see the morning tides are always a little bit higher than the evening tides. After another lovely meal at the Butter and Oyster, it was time to head back to the boat and try and come up with a game plan for the morning. I was feeling much more optimistic that I'd get the boat off on the next tide. I could already hear the water sloshing against the hull a lot earlier than it did the night before. High tide came and the boat was not budging. With the engine in full reverse, I winched the rear line around the other scrubbing pole as hard as I could, and slowly we inched our way off. Ivania and I looked worse for wear. We looked like we'd been dragged through a hedge backwards. There was ropes hanging off the back of the boat as well as the step ladder. I can't tell you how happy I've just got it off, and if I didn't get the boat off on today's tide, it would have been till Wednesday, and I would have had to get a lift out from the boatyard, and he said he could only do it on Monday, so absolutely buzzing with that one. My good friend Joe turned up to make sure I was alright. Apart from being able to feel my ribs, I thought the best course of action was to go to Monomer's for a full fat boys breakfast. I'm sure you can appreciate the amount of effort that goes into making these videos, so if you would like to support the channel, head over to the East Coast Sailing shop, and you can be assured 5% of the profits will go to the RNLI to keep us sailors safe at sea. I just want to say a special thank you to Sue and Mike, who are both on boat SY Truder, who are based at Woolversone. They made one of the biggest clothing purchases for East Coast Sailing clothing, so thank you very much. If you're watching this near Sunday the 13th of April, chances are I'm already making my way over towards the Netherlands, and you can track me in real time by clicking on the About Me section, and there's a link to my AIS, so you'll see in real time exactly where I am. Thanks for watching East Coast Sailing, and if you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to get the latest episodes. Come and join us next week as I test an £8 boom brake solution which I think will elevate your downward sailing experience.